Welcome, everyone. Really exciting event today. Joining us today is Senator Alex Padilla from California. Welcome, Senator.
Thanks for having me on.
Listen, I wanted you to come on because one of the things that comes up in our community so much is this concern about what's going to happen with immigration and ICE, with it getting all the additional resources. You've been at the front lines of this battle, obviously, in ways that you've wanted and ways that you didn't want over the last few months. Could you just start by sharing your thoughts about what's happened, how we should think about what we need to do next, and where this is all headed?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity. Look, there's no shortage of challenges, of hard issues, and attacks on our democracy writ large from this administration. So, I offer that as the context with which we're having this immigration conversation. It's not the only fight we're having, but it's certainly one of the more intense and passionate ones for people on all sides. But I also think historical context is important. Right? For me, it's the very reason I'm in public service to begin with. Back in 1994, I was a recent graduate from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, had a mechanical engineering degree in hand, and I was excited to get started in my career. But on the ballot in California, yes, in the state of California, was a measure known as Proposition 187 that, the campaign was just immigrant scapegoating, to put it bluntly, but the measure itself would have made immigrants and their children ineligible for things like public health care or even public education. It mandated teachers and school personnel to report children to the authorities. That sort of cruelty, in many ways, a precursor to what we're dealing with nationally now. But I share that because that's what motivated me to enter organizing, advocacy, campaign work, and people like my parents who had been here for decades, immigrants from Mexico with no urgency to become citizens, finally taking those steps. It's an important point in California political history. It's how we responded to those attacks. It was through engagement, through citizenship and naturalization and voter registration and mobilizing that made California what it is today. And so as difficult as that chapter was for California, as tough as this chapter is for the country right now, I think there's the playbook for how the good can come of this. It's not going to happen on its own, but when enough of us across the country engage more, engage others more, we can turn the political tide. So I know that's a little bit of big picture talk, but that's really what drives me every day, because whether I'm sitting in the Judiciary Committee, having these debates, having these discussions with colleagues on both sides of the aisle, or have the audacity to attend a press conference with the Secretary of Homeland Security, and we all saw what happened 6 weeks ago, we all have to do our part.
Well, and what's been interesting is in polling, we've now seen when these issues have been put in front of the American people in the stark way that they have, not only has Trump's approval rating on what he's doing with immigration plummeted and deportations, but also people's respect and admiration of immigrants have also gone way up in recent polling. And it's reinforcing your basic argument here, which is that we need to have this debate. We need to lean in. We need to talk to the American people about what kind of future we want to have together and what's going to drive our economy. Because one of the lines I think that Trump has made a big mistake on is that while people have wanted border security, they also wanted immigrants who are here treated humanely. And I think he's crossed over into a line of public opinion that whether they understood this or not, or whether driven by their fanaticism and extremism, they've put him in political peril to some degree, I think, with the public, but also they're putting a lot of regular people in peril too. And I'm just wondering if because of your responsibilities in the Senate for helping oversee, which is the reason why you're at the press conference, for example, right? Is that what are you thinking about what we can do to mitigate the damage in the Senate and in the public over the next few years?
Yeah, but that's a great point. And so I think a couple of things. Number one, we have to put a spotlight on the facts. When I was at that press conference, the question I was trying to ask was, what is the data? What are the statistics? Because for all the talk and rhetoric about dangerous, violent criminals, we were hearing stories, anecdotes, people calling our office each and every day saying, my husband, wife, child, brother, son, whoever, had been detained. They're not a violent criminal. They're not a convicted criminal. They're just a car wash employee, or they're a cook. Like my dad worked in the kitchen for 40 years, or they're a farm worker, or they're somebody who may be undocumented. And there's multiple reasons how people end up undocumented. But the fact of the matter is, with no criminal convictions, they're raising families, paying taxes. Is that really who we're targeting here in increasingly aggressive and cruel fashion? That's not right. And since that press conference, we've come to learn some of the data that supports what we knew anecdotally. The people that are arrested, the people detained, the people deported even without due process are by and large people without that criminal conviction history. And so the general public doesn't like that. That's not what they supported at the ballot box last November. And the public opinion tide is shifting. The other thing we kind of should be doing is tell those stories. I mean, just the first example that comes to mind is when a few weeks ago, there's a gentleman working in landscaping that is violently detained and put in a detention center. But he happens to be married to a U.S. citizen spouse, a wife, has 3 sons, one who's a Marine veteran, the other 2 active duty Marines. Think about that. 3 children willing to pay the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our nation. And this is how they treat their father, who happened to be undocumented. So as people hear more and more human stories like that, real examples of who it is caught up in these raids, a lot more of these cases than the dangerous violent criminals that Donald Trump wants you to focus on, people know that there has to be a better way.
Well, and you've moved some recent legislation, I think, about legalization of the undocumented community. I think this is a goal that Democrats cannot let up on for 1 minute. I think that, in recent years, during the the heightened flows of the Biden administration, I think there were some voices in our family urging caution about some of these issues. I think this is a time, in my view, I mean, we're being called here about our humanity, about our commitment to each other, about our prosperity. I mean, removing 10 to 15 million people from the country will be a devastating blow to our economy. You're already starting to see some of that in California. And, we do need to find a better way. And so I'm wondering what your thinking is about how you're going to prosecute this internally in the Senate and in the public, starting with this legislation that you've recently introduced.
Right. So first of all, we sort of break it down, right? Because immigration policy and law can get real complex real quick. But at a very high level, there's, first of all, the border. Everybody agrees we need a secure, orderly, but humane border. There's the issue of how many people are wanting to come to the United States under a work visa, a student visa, tourist visa, whatever it is. And even those mechanisms need a lot of modernization and improvement. My bill is only focused on the people who are already here, not the people wanting to come here, people who have been here for years, in some cases decades. It's not a new agency to be created, and not a new bureaucracy, not even a new program. The registry is a law that's been on the books for about a century. And it says if you've been in the United States for 7 years or more, you've paid your taxes, don't have that criminal history, et cetera, then yes, let's afford you a step towards legalization as a step towards residency. Because people living in the shadows is not good for anybody. So those who have earned it, let's give them that opportunity. It's been updated over time to adjust the deadline by which you can apply. The last time it was updated was under Republican President Ronald Reagan. Even he knew, to quote him, it's a matter of basic fairness for the people that have been living here. So the law's out, it's still on the books, but because of the deadline, you now have to have been here 52 years or more, as opposed to the 7. By updating the deadline, we can bring that relief to millions of people if they otherwise qualify. And again, not just a good thing for them and their families, right? All the moral arguments that we've long believed, but the economic argument. Because if the United States government were to deport 10, 12, 15 million people, that's a whole lot of workers in key industries. Inflation is tough enough as it is. The tariff wars that Donald Trump is losing is driving costs up. It's going to be more expensive to deliver goods and services if there's less workers doing those jobs. And on that point, I just got to call out the ironic cruelty here. As you recall, at the end of the Trump administration, the first one, the outset of the COVID-19 pandemic, it was actually Donald Trump's Department of Homeland Security that designated workers in so many sectors as, quote, essential. People in agriculture, in the food supply chain, in transportation, in construction, in healthcare, et cetera. And now they were essential then, and now they seem to be the primary target of these arrests, detentions, and deportations. That's cruel, and it's bad for the country.
I've heard you make that point before, and I think it's one of the most powerful things I've heard in this whole immigration debate is that these were the same people who were essential workers that were keeping us alive, keeping our kids in school, keeping us, keeping the country moving forward under incredible duress just a few years ago. Same guy, right? So it's a powerful point. And listen, what I just want to say to you is that we can offer that. I want to make sure this community, as you introduce new bills, as you try to rally the public towards a better path, please let us know. Call on us anytime to let us know what we can do to help. This is an issue that's very central to the Hopium community, the more than 150,000 people that are part of this effort. And so we've got your back here, and just let us know what we can do.
And because the one hope I have, the one prayer I have after that press conference 6 weeks ago with the Secretary of Homeland Security is that good comes out of it in the form of people who may not have been paying attention before are now paying attention. You have no choice. And people who might have paid attention before but not enough to care now care, and care enough to get engaged and to engage others. 2 days after that press conference was No King's Day. And so as tough of an experience as that was for my family and friends, boy, was my spirit lifted in seeing the millions of people across the country take to the streets, not be shy, not to cower to this wannabe king authoritarian president that we have, but actually speak up, stand up, because that's what we've done throughout the history of our nation to defend our fundamental rights. So we have to, meet these mass deportations with mass mobilization. Right? Let's meet the chaos with our own organizing. That No King's Day could not be a one and done. We have to stay engaged, whether it's more rallies, more protests. Call your member of Congress. So many people that have never even done that. You can support the advocacy organizations that are fighting the good fight, whether it's on immigration or any other issue that we care about. And for sure, everybody ought to be organizing and getting ready for the midterm elections next year.
Well, I know we only have a few more minutes, and I just wondered if you could share with us your thoughts about, it looks like this Friday, the president is going to be imposing 15% tariffs on the entire world. I mean, it looks like is based on what he's done with Japan and Europe. It's a very consequential day for working people in America. It's a huge, tax increase, taxation without representation, as we should be calling it. But I'm wondering if you could talk about that and the effect of tariffs, and also just your thoughts about what's going to happen in the fall when we get back here in September with the budget and the continuing resolution. And because there's obviously the March effort of that was a little contentious inside the family, and just wondered if you could share your thoughts on those two things before we go.
Yeah, so on the tariffs, what's the phrase? Don't get it twisted. For as much as Donald Trump says he's going to make other countries pay, that's not how tariffs work. Tariffs are costs imposed on U.S. companies that are importing goods from elsewhere. And those companies are not going to absorb that cost. They're going to pass it along to consumers. So when you see the price of whatever it is go up, electronics, produce, a lot of examples, that's Americans paying increased costs for Donald Trump's whims. That's what it is. So you can call it the Trump taxes because that's what they are. Now, when we get back after Labor Day for the home stretch of the fiscal year deadline to pass spending bills, here's what I'm waiting to see. I mean, the way spending bills are passed in the Senate and in Congress on a bipartisan basis, but there's no trust there. The confidence in negotiating in good faith is gone because we've had bipartisan spending bills that were negotiated in good faith, and Republicans, not just through the budget reconciliation process, but rescissions process, they have, on a partisan basis, just cut areas of the budget that they don't like because it happened to be important to Democrats in our agenda. And now we're back at the table saying, work with us to craft the next fiscal year spending plan. I'd love to believe it, but I need some gestures. I need some guarantees. I need some assurances that we're not going to be, played again.
And I think that people don't really understand the
And,
sort
and
of
maybe I should rephrase that. I don't think we're
yeah.
played. I think it was Republicans acting not in good faith. It was their bad faith of having agreed to deals, but when Donald Trump and his administration, right, from Stephen Miller and Russell Vought and the band of characters he's got around him says, no, we want to cut, and just roll Democrats. That's not operating in good faith. That's not good government.
Well, and it even gets to something that you raised at the very beginning, is that it's so fundamentally illiberal. I mean, there is no version of a democracy that would be strong and vibrant where you pass a budget, you negotiate a budget, it gets signed into law, and one side gets to go back afterwards and pull stuff out that they didn't like, that they just agreed to and actually voted for. And it's on its face. It's so not only just bad faith, but it's just it's sort of in some ways the end of Congress. Congress, if you guys can't pass a law, believe that they will abide by it and play by the rules. I mean, they've already demonstrated in their cuts on NIH and FEMA and everything else that they're not willing to be bound by the law and by binding agreements that the Congress struck, that they signed and voted for. I mean, this is such I don't think we've been able to capture to some degree with the public just how fundamentally anti-democratic this is and how much bad faith they're really expressing. Russell Vought has been very vocal about this pocket rescission idea. It's been great to see Susan Collins, the head of the Appropriations Committee, fighting back on that, saying that she thinks it's illegal. But they're talking about escalating the rescission process, not de-escalating.
Right. And here's another good example, right? FEMA. Trump wants to eliminate FEMA, where forget about the devastation in Los Angeles back in January, but there's been fires and hurricanes and floods elsewhere in the country, from the Carolinas to, the tragic floods in Texas not too long ago. Where are Republicans in Congress? They should be standing up, speaking up, demanding better for their constituents. So as time goes on, the question just gets hotter and hotter for Republicans in Congress. Are they more loyal to their constituents or to Donald Trump?
Anything else before we go, Senator, that's on your mind, or anything you wanted to bring up for folks before I know you've got to vote, so I got to let you go here in a minute.
No, look, as tough as it can be sometimes, my message to everybody is you got to keep the faith and you got to keep organizing. That's going to be our way through this.
Well, thank you, Senator. Keep up the great work. We have a lot of followers in California. I know that people love you there, and I'm really grateful for you spending the time with us today. And just good luck in these battles ahead.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Please, if you enjoyed this today, share it with others, subscribe, and as the Senator said, let's keep fighting. Let's keep organizing.